Hi everyone, good morning. Thanks.
Good morning. My name is Sarah Moya. I'm a professional development specialist with the Illinois Student Assistance Commission.
And my name is Sara Espinosa. I am the manager for professional development at ISAC. Thanks again for joining us today. As if you've joined us before, you know that we are live every Tuesday at 10 a.m. talking about different topics of college and financial aid. And today we have a special topic which kind of broke our normal schedule for a little bit, but it's an important topic that I know a lot of you are wondering about and that you may have questions about. We're sorry about starting a little bit late. We had some technical issues getting up and running, but hopefully you all can see us. And please feel free to leave any questions or to include any comments or concerns in the comment section on here, and we'll keep track of those throughout the Facebook Live session. But today we're going to be talking about COVID-19 and how that's been affecting students. So we'll talk a little bit about all different kinds of students. We'll talk about rising seniors, which are currently our juniors that are graduating, how this is affecting them, high school seniors getting ready to enroll in college for the fall, and then current college students as well. So we'll talk a little bit about everything, but please stick around with us for the next 30 minutes and let us know if you have any questions.
Yeah, so if we want to go ahead and get started with those students who have been, who are rising seniors, who are juniors in the current year, I think one of the biggest questions that is on their mind, just because it affects their college, process, is going to be what's going to happen is with the ACT and SAT score, especially since their national dates, their national dates have already passed. Now with the ACT, College Board has said that they're going to move their dates, their national testing dates, it's going to move to June 13th and July 18th. With all of these dates, just stay pending though, because we don't know what's really happening. So just stay on their website to see if these dates do change. Now with the ACT, if you had used the fee waiver, one of the nice things that you can do if you need to register for the June 13th and July 18th date, you sign in into your account, and then you're able to just change the deadline that you want to, not the deadline, the new date for the testing, and then you'll be, they'll automatically know that you use the fee waiver, so you're not going to be charged anything or need to do anything in addition other than just registering for those new dates. Now, if you would like to get a refund, you are able to do, because you can make the June 13th or the July 18th date, you are able to get a refund as well if you did pay out-of-pocket costs. For the SAT, if you had a fee waiver or if you would like to get a refund, you do have to call customer service or their student services. But they haven't really set a date yet for when they want, for when they'll have the next testing date. They just said the first week of June. Again, for both of these dates, for both of these tests, just make sure that you're checking on their website to see any new dates that they're going to be giving, or for the SAT when they do have the date.
Now, a little bit more for those of you that are rising seniors. I know some of the closures of school campuses and cancellations of events will probably have affected some of the plans that you had to either visit campuses or to connect with admissions offices or with students on campus. So we encourage you to find alternatives for how to visit that campus or how to connect with students. A lot of colleges are offering virtual campus tours. Either they already had that in place before, or that's something that they're offering now. They're offering some sort of virtual hangout or some sort of call-in option or event for students. So check out their options for prospective students. You will have to check the individual institutions that you're interested in to see what alternatives they're offering. But just know that those are still options. I know it's a little bit harder to visit a campus virtually, but at least it's still an option that's there. Once things go back to normal, there will still be the options to visit campus, and you do have a little bit of time with that. I know right now, I'm sure everyone is freaking out because, it's a lot of changes in such a short amount of time, but there are alternatives that you can explore for that. If when things go back to normal, you're experiencing a financial hardship that prevents you from visiting that campus, try to find an alternative near you. So a local option could be, for example, a similar institution near your area, whether if you're looking for a four-year institution that's outside of your state, perhaps looking for a four-year institution with the same demographics or same size of the student body, but looking closer to home, just so that you can get an idea. I know different institutions, even if the same size or even if they're offering the same majors, it's still a completely different experience, but at least you'll still have an option to visit a campus near you, if it's no longer feasible to visit that campus once the institutions reopen and once things sort of go back to normal a little bit.
And with any regular admissions process or college application process, we do always encourage students to really know what social life is like in the college. So we highly encourage you guys for those virtual hangouts. If you guys really want to know what campus life is, schools are setting up virtual hangouts with current students, so that if you're an incoming or you're thinking about going into that school, to applying to that school, that you're able to actually talk to students who live there and who have experienced it there, so that you can have a better idea of what life is like. Like Sarah mentioned, it's not ideal that you can visit, and sometimes virtual tours are not the best, but as of right now, it is it is a really great option for you to connect with current students at the school.
And I think it's still, like Anna mentioned, it's still a good option. I actually I attended my undergraduate institution. The first time I set foot on it and the first time I visited was when I showed up for orientation. And it was a little bit of a culture shock, just because I didn't really know what I was expecting. I don't really think I realized how big my institution was until I was there. So at least familiarizing yourself with some of that beforehand will help not have to experience so much of that culture shock once you show up on campus. So even if that means just the virtual tours, I've seen some of those are really cool. They're really helpful, and they show you different parts of campuses or of a campus, or even some of the buildings. That's still a really nice option. So if you can't visit the campus, don't be discouraged. Still visit virtually, and it'll still give you an idea of at least what the campus looks like, what the size of the campus is, and then just feel free to reach out to students. I know students are always happy to answer questions, and even with prospective student events that admissions offices have, they very often have either current students or alumni on panels, or even just there to help answer questions. So feel free to reach out, check out what your admissions offices have in place. But if you are still considering multiple institutions, if you haven't really narrowed it down, then you will have to repeat that process for every institution that you are interested in.
Yeah. And now for those students who are going to be college freshmen next year, we know that the May 1st, the national admissions deadline is May 1st. It's coming up. But luckily, a lot of schools have changed or extended that deadline into June. If you're not sure, or if you're looking into that college process, that part of your college process, just reach out to your admissions counselor, or check out their website, because generally they're putting out all of this information on their website to see if they have extended that line for it.
And also I mentioned this, I think, on like the last one or two Facebook Lives, but NACAC, which is the National Association for College Admissions Counseling, actually, when all of this sort of started, they created a database where colleges have been adding their information. So you can go on this database, and I'll include the link at the end of the Facebook Live on there so that you can go straight to the website. But the database is basically a searchable engine that you can filter out schools and see which schools have extended or pushed back the May 1st decision date, and also which schools have pushed back deposits. And so you'll be able to have that in sort of a more condensed location, so you don't have to go to the individual websites. If your school's not on the list, you might still have to go to your school's website, but there are a lot of institutions that have added their information on there that are being more flexible with these dates, given the circumstances, given that, you know, a lot of parents have been laid off, a lot of students aren't working either. So reach out to your schools. I mean, it never hurts to ask, right? Like the worst thing that could ever happen is somebody says no to you, but at least you know for sure what that answer is. And so if you look at that database, you can search the institutions by country, by state. You can see if they're open to admissions visitors, or if they have some sort of alternative. You can see if they're still hosting some sort of admissions event. So it'll give you a lot of information about those institutions that have added themselves on there. And I believe as of now, there's about 1,000 institutions on the database, if this is correct, what I'm seeing on here. So that's one good location that you can just go straight on there and look up all of this information.
And another tip that I I mean, we always mention this like almost on every webinar. You should be checking your email, and if you have a student account, you should be checking it. But it's especially important right now that you're checking your emails constantly, and you're also, if they provide you with a student account, that you're checking that student account for any updates. Because since we're moving into the virtual world, literally, they are sending all notifications virtually. So make sure that you're checking your emails and your student account so that you can get all of the information. If any dates change, you know that those dates have changed and you're prepared for them.
Yeah, and they'll also let you know, usually via email, since that's the easiest way to communicate with most students. They'll let you know of any changes to their processes. For example, if they are making any of those exceptions that we talked about with extending decision day or extending any deposits that are due to the institution. But then also, that's how they'll let you know about any potential changes in orientation or registration. Right now, a lot of institutions have started to move also the summer term into online components, and so a lot of institutions will be hosting their summer classes online, which could potentially mean that there will be some impact for some orientation or registration dates depending on when those are. So it's super important to not only check your email, but visit the school's websites regularly for updates. Most institutions have created a designated page or have some sort of banner when you log into their main homepage where they are posting updates related to COVID-19 and how that's impacting their students, their institutions, their staff, etc. So you can find a lot of that information there. So make sure you double check just to make sure that you don't miss orientation, you don't miss registration. If that will happen virtually, then you'll know beforehand. So make sure you are double checking, and then keep up with your email, because it's not just going to be admissions related stuff. Financial aid offices will be reaching out as well. I know a lot of students are still going through a lot of the processes with either institutional deadlines or with completing the verification process, and we will talk a little bit about verification and what to do if you're experiencing special situations that are affecting your financial abilities to pay for college or your family's household. But we'll talk a little bit more about that towards the end of the segment.
Also, don't be afraid to ask questions. Even though the institutions are closed, a lot of these institutions, if the financial aid office might be working from home now. So even though the institution, the actual physical school might be closed, you can still reach out to someone. I'm sure every department or every school has someone from every department at least answering emails and questions, because like we mentioned, they're still continuing to kind of address these issues as they're coming, even though they're moving fast. Don't be afraid to reach out to them, especially they're not going to see your faces. You're doing it via email. So reach out with the questions, ask about any process. We mentioned the deadline, we mentioned any deposits that you might have to make, but also if you were planning on living on campus, ask about what the process is with that. Has anything been pushed? Do you have to turn in any applications for that? What will that process look like for you? So make sure that you're asking those questions. Again, with financial aid as well, if you haven't received your award letter, and it's not in your student account, or your financial aid offer, and it's not in your student account, make sure that you're asking those questions to see if you need to do anything. The financial aid office, the admissions office, I'm sure they have someone on campus virtually answering those questions.
And I mentioned this last week too, but one thing to remember is that once you're a college student, you have to be the one to advocate for yourself. Financial aid offices, admissions offices will rarely speak to the parent about that process, because now it's up to the student to address these concerns. So a lot of the communication does have to come directly from the student. So make sure the student is the one reaching out. Make sure you are the one contacting the institution to ask for any assistance or any questions that you may have. Some institutions are being flexible, so double check, because one of the other things that we've seen institutions doing is perhaps offering or accepting unofficial school transcripts. So if you're not able to obtain one directly from your counselor and mail it in because schools are closed, institutions may be making some exceptions for temporarily accepting unofficial transcripts, and then maybe once things go back to normal, accepting the requiring then the final transcript. But a lot of this, you have to reach out to the institution and either ask yourselves, or you have to go in and see if there's any updates if you haven't already received anything via email. So make sure you are keeping up with your email. I know it's really hard to keep a regular routine sometimes once we're at home doing the all of our work or our schoolwork or trying to do online classes and doing everything from home, but try to at least keep up with your email to see if you get any updates from your institution that might be relevant to this situation.
And if you are in need of assistance because of your transcripts, make sure that you're checking in maybe with your high school counselor to see if there is some sort of way that they are emailing the transcripts to the institution. So make sure that you're checking also with your high school counselor. And if they say that there's nothing they can do because they're not physically in school, then I would suggest that you also follow up with the institution to see what the rules and regulations would be with that.
And as we mentioned, I see that we have a couple of viewers live currently. If you do have questions, please feel free to leave them in the comment section. We'll try to address those throughout the segment that we're doing today, but we are talking about COVID-19 and the impact that it's having on our students. We've talked a little bit about the impact that it's having on juniors with test dates and potentially visiting online or visiting campuses in person. And then we also talked a little bit about seniors and how the admissions and financial aid processes could potentially be impacted or how they're changing to adapt to the current situation. So be sure to check with your institutions and please leave any questions that you may have in the comment section of this video. Even if you're watching this later and you're not watching it live, we'll still be happy to address any questions that you may have. Now, as far as current college students, those students are also being obviously impacted with the closures of institutions. Many students have had to leave their campuses on a very short notice, and there are a lot of things that are being done. A lot of this information will be coming directly from the institutions if it hasn't already, but I know a lot of institutions did a really good job at connecting with their students, letting them know what the plan is, giving them some time to either move out of the campus residence halls or finding some sort of alternative, whether that meant leaving a residence hall open or giving students more time to be able to find a way to get back home. But one thing that Anna and I want to talk about and that I'm sure a lot of people have heard about is the CARES Act that was passed into law, which makes a number of different allowances and provides funding for a number of different things. But we want to focus specifically on the component for students with student loans. So students that already had existing student loans, whether you're a current college student, whether you're an adult that already graduated from college, separated from their institution, really for anybody that already had a student loan with the Department of Education, those student loans have been placed or your servicers are working to place them in what's called an administrative forbearance, which means that they're temporarily stopping payments on those student loans. You're not required to make payments until September 30th. And then the interest rate for those student loans is also being moved to 0% interest. Now, what that means is that you are not required to make payments from now until September 30th on your student loans if you have loans that are considered eligible, and those would be loans that are owned by the Department of Education, so that come directly from the department. That does not apply for private loans. You'll have to work directly with your loan provider or loan servicer in that case to see what your options are. But for any loans that are from the Department of Education, you do have until September 30th with 0% interest. Now, even though that means that you don't have to make payments, if you are able to make payments, then this is actually a good time to do so because it does benefit you that it is at a 0% interest. So if you do choose to make payments on that loan, then that full amount is being applied to the principal of the loan and hopefully help you pay that off a little quicker, since you're basically given 6 months from March to September, I think, that you'll have with 0% interest on that loan.
And then also, when we're talking about loans from the Department of Education, it does not mean that your loan provider will be the Department of Education. The loan comes from the Department of Education, but then they kind of give it to a loan provider. So if you do have loans or your school has provided you with loans, check with who your loan provider is, and then you're able to know. You shouldn't have to reach out to your loan provider to get these benefits if you are not able to make payments. Most loan providers from the Department of Education, they've been automatically placing students in this, but they do also suggest that you reach out to them. So if you log into your account or if you don't have an account, a good place to start is on the student loans website. and then go ahead and get into your loan provider. It'll let you know who your loan provider is, and then you're able to create an account if you haven't already. But if you have one already, just check back in, and it'll let you know kind of what the process is with that. Again, like I mentioned, most of them have already said that they're going to automatically place the students, but they're also sending out emails to notify the student whether they're going to be placed or not. If you have not received an email or you're unsure about it, make sure that you're checking in with your loan provider to get that information in.
Yeah, and then one other thing is, if you did have auto pay set up, a lot of loan servicers are canceling those. But if you haven't seen that happen and you're unable to pay your loans, just double check to make sure that your auto pays are turned off, because otherwise, since those are already set up in place to automatically withdraw from your account, you want to make sure that those are turned off. I believe most servicers are canceling those automatically, but you will want to double check. Now, that website where you can go and check on your student loans is studentloans.gov. That's going to be the best place to get started. It'll tell you who your loan servicer is, what your interest rate is on that loan, how much you've taken out, how many loans you have. So there's a lot of useful information on studentloans.gov. Make sure you log on there if you have questions about your student loans and whether they could apply. And then also the studentaid.gov website also has a lot of information on this, on which loans qualify, on which loans do not qualify, what options you have. But then one other thing to mention is that with this whole thing with the CARES Act, with the student loans, one other thing that's being done is, if you had loans that were in default, so this wouldn't apply to current college students getting financial aid, because you can't have a loan in default and get more financial aid, but this is more so for anybody who's already separated from their institution and had a loan in what's called default, which means you haven't made payments in about 9 months, on that student loan. If you had any during this time, so they're not going to be garnishing your wages. So if that did happen during this time from March 13th through September 30th, if that did happen more so on the front end around March 13th, they will refund those back to the loan holder, just so that you have those funds in case you need to make other payments. You have to remember that this doesn't mean that your loan is no longer in default. It just means that they're temporarily putting a halt on garnishing people's wages, given the circumstances, and that people might need those funds to pay for other things or other expenses.
Now, also, if you had a federal work-study job, if you're a college student and had a federal work-study job and it has been disturbed because of the situation that we're in, make sure that you're reaching out to your employer or your financial aid office, as you might qualify to still receive some of those funds if they're able to find work for you to do from home, or either if they have a special fund for you to be able to get that money as well.
Yeah, and institutions, I believe, will have already sent that information to students, but if you haven't heard about it, just double check again on these websites that your institutions have. They're posting some of those updates. Now, the other thing to mention is, one other thing that's included in the CARES Act is, if you are a current college student and you have a qualifying emergency for which you are unable to complete the semester, then you have to take, let's say, a leave of absence, and you can't complete the semester, you have to withdraw. If you don't finish out the semester and you don't get grades for this semester, then what they're doing is your financial aid for the semester basically doesn't count. So if you received a Pell Grant, it doesn't count towards the lifetime eligibility units that you have to use from Pell. If you basically, any financial aid that you receive, it's like as if it never happened. But then it's also, if you didn't get grades, then that means this semester didn't count towards graduation. If you do finish out the semester, if you do receive a grade, then it's like normal semester if you had with your financial aid. But that is another sort of exception or accommodation that was built into the with the CARES Act. One other thing to mention is, within the CARES Act, there's also provision that requires schools to provide emergency grants to students. So if you are experiencing issues with basically anything that's built into the cost of attendance, with paying for any of these fees, paying for housing, paying for food, paying for other expenses, contact your institutions. A lot of institutions already have some sort of application process in place, or they're letting students know that something will be coming, or so that they know how to apply for these emergency grants. Those amounts can vary by institution, but just continue to check with your institution, not just for emergency grants, but for other support that they could be offering. So there might be additional assistance coming from your campus specifically for current college students. For high school seniors, since you're not yet on the college campus, we'll talk a little bit more about just the overall process of financial aid and how to make a request for this. But if you want to talk a little bit more about some of those additional campus services or other things that students might be interested in, you can go ahead and do so, Anna.
So if you are experiencing, if you're having a hard time having access to food and supplies, a lot of college campuses, they do have a food pantry. Even though they do still have opening hours. If you go onto our website, our student portal website, studentportal.isac.org, then you are able to get a list to the food pantries available in colleges around the state of Illinois. You are able to get that. Also, if you are having some, you're having a hard time with the situation, or just in general need social emotional support, there are still there are schools that are still providing school counseling service. So make sure that you're checking in for that. We don't have a list for that, but you are able to check in with your school to see how they're providing social emotional support for students and services. So make sure you're checking in with that. And along with the CARES Act and the emergency funds that Sarah talked about, when we're talking about cost of attendance, remember, that's going to be books, supplies, anything related to transportation and miscellaneous expenses. So anything that has to do, or any hardship that you're going through that will have an impact on your education, and including transportation. If your car no longer works, that's going to be part of transportation. So if you're experiencing any hardship with that, those are the type of expenses that you might want to reach out to them to see if they'll have additional funds for you.
And the last thing we want to talk about today specifically applies to current students, current seniors, and who are moving into college for the fall, and then current college students. So we want to talk about the verification process a little bit, and then also what to do to address any changes in your family's finances. So for students who are still going through the verification process, if you completed, for example, FAFSA, there's a process in place that schools use called verification to double check and confirm that the information you've provided is correct. One thing right now that's changed is that the IRS is only issuing tax documents electronically. And so for the verification process, very often schools will require students to submit tax return transcripts, tax account transcripts, which if you're not able to access online, you'll have to normally request a paper version of it to be mailed from the IRS. But the IRS has announced that they're currently not issuing any paper documents. So if you're able to access that online, you can still do that. If you're not able to access that online, your financial aid office will let you know what the workaround is. The Department of Education will be issuing guidance to financial aid offices on how to address those issues. But if you have any questions or you're unable to obtain that because you're not able to access the electronic version of those documents, contact your financial aid office, let them know what your issue is, let them know that you're not able to access them online, and then they'll be able to let you know how to proceed. Sometimes they'll make exceptions with, some sort of statement or something else, but they're also waiting on guidance to come directly from the financial aid office.
In addition to that, if you needed to turn in any types of documentation or information and you were going to doing it in a paper form, I would just suggest checking in with the financial aid office, especially if they're working from home and they're not receiving their correspondence because they're not in the office. Check in with them to see if you could maybe hold off on that process, or if you're able to scan a document instead of having to mail in the actual paper forms, just because we know that people are being cautious about the types of things they come into contact with, and that includes paperwork as well.
And then lastly, I know a lot of people have been impacted by COVID-19 in different ways. Some people have lost their jobs, some people are making less money, some people are working from home. But if you are in a situation that your family's financial ability has now changed, let's say a parent has been laid off, both parents have been laid off, or you're experiencing maybe situations like a death in a member of the family, or unusually high medical expenses due to some of this stuff, you can contact your financial aid office and explain the situation. And this has always been the case. There's always a process called professional or special circumstances, which allows financial aid administrators to use something called professional judgment. So they'll assess your situation, they'll see what your circumstances are, they'll see how those things have changed, and then they'll be able to make accommodations or adjustments to either your data elements or to your cost of attendance. So as you know, when you complete a FAFSA, when you submit those documents for verification, a lot of this is based on 2 years prior. So right now, when you complete the 2021 FAFSA, you're actually using 2018 tax data. But from 2018 to now, a lot might have changed in your family situation, right? So if your family is no longer making that amount of money, if your parents have split up, if you have situations whether or not they're related to COVID-19, you can always reach out to the financial aid office and let them know. Most institutions will have some sort of document that you can complete. You can always check on their website specifically. Many of them will label it as a special circumstance request or a request form that you can complete to let them know and get started on this process. I'm sure now there will be a large volume of those requests in place, so just be patient. A lot of financial aid offices are still working, but they're just working under different conditions. They're working from home. They're working different hours. So just be patient. A lot of this may take some time, but they are processing this information. And so if your family is experiencing any of those changes, please make sure you're letting them know. That's the only way they can help you, is if you explain what your family situation is.
And I think the last point that we have to talk about is one of the biggest concerns when parents and families are talking to, especially about the FAFSA, is about reporting their income or thinking that they make too much and won't qualify for any financial aid. And as part of the CARES Act as well, for those families and students who are going to be receiving that stimulus check, the Department of Ed has come out with guidance that any money that they receive from this assistance won't count against them when it comes to completing the FAFSA and receiving their EFC. So if you're worried about this additional money coming in, don't worry about it, because it will not be counted against the student for when they complete their FAFSA and to receive financial aid as well.
And the same applies with other benefits. If you've already completed a FAFSA, or if you're not familiar with the FAFSA, there is a question that asks about any other benefits that your family may have received, for example, food stamps, SSI, TANF, WIC. If you are receiving any of those, whether it's because of COVID-19 or not, those do not count either towards the calculation of your EFC, so those aren't going to be counted as additional income. So if your family is in a situation where you need to apply for additional benefits, please do so. That's not going to impact your ability to receive financial assistance from the federal government to pay for college. So be sure you are looking at all of your alternatives. Like Anna mentioned, with the stimulus check, that won't count either. So don't be afraid to ask for help when it's needed, either from other local agencies or directly from your financial aid office or from your institution in general. Like I mentioned earlier, the only way to receive the assistance that you need is if you advocate for yourself. And I know sometimes it can be intimidating, or it can be a little scary to have to explain your situation to people that you don't know. But I think one of the things that helps a lot right now is that a lot of this is virtual communication. So you don't have to see people. You don't have to interact with them in person if that's not your comfort zone. But you can call the financial aid office, send an email, ask questions, because that's the only way you'll learn about what options are available to you.
And if there's any takeaway from our Facebook Live today, is that if you feel like any of this applies to you, or you're interested in any of this information, if you're a current college student, if you're a junior, you were getting ready to take the ACT or the SAT, and you haven't received notification of any of this, the biggest takeaway is reach out to the schools and institutions, check on their websites to know more information about this, or ask your high school counselors for support if you are a high school student, because a lot of our work from home includes keeping up with what's going on so that we're able to inform the students as well.
All right, well, thank you all so much for joining. If you're not able to see this live, then thanks for watching the recording later. This will be available not only on the ISAC Facebook page, but also on the ISAC student portal. All of these videos are uploaded on a weekly basis to the Now Playing section. We'll leave a couple of links that we've mentioned on the comment section. So some of the links that we've mentioned from today regarding sources for information or for assistance. We'll leave those in there. And if you have questions, feel free to leave them. Even if you watch this Facebook Live later, we'll come back and check the comment section to see if there are any questions. But thanks again for joining. And we hope you'll join us again next week. Next week, we will be covering the same topic, but we will be covering it in Spanish. So we will have the same information for Spanish-speaking students and their families. So please feel free to share this information. Let them know that we'll be live again next week. And we are, again, live every Tuesday at 10 from now. I believe it's until the end of May. So we'll have different topics. Check those out as well if you're interested. But thanks again for joining us today. Have a good day.